When I first spotted that glaringly bright orange violation notice plastered onto my mailbox, I swear I had absolutely no idea it was the first thread in unraveling a nasty criminal conspiracy, stretching its tentacles across 3 whole counties. How on earth was I supposed to know that simply trying to protect my grandfather's old RV would transform me into the Meadowbrook Estates HOA's absolute worst nightmare? Comment below and let me know where you're watching from. The tow truck's flashing red and blue lights stabbed into my rearview mirror as I practically flew down our long, dusty driveway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Unbelievably, someone was actually trying to steal my family's RV right off our own land. You see, I've lived on this sprawling 15-acre farm my entire life. My great-grandfather, a man of sheer grit, built this place with his bare hands way back in 1932, long before any fancy cookie-cutter houses and their nosy neighbors ever popped up. Our vintage 1978 Winnebago, the very one my grandpa drove us all the way to Yellowstone in when I was just 8 years old, had sat peacefully in the exact same spot by the barn for over 30 years. Nobody, absolutely nobody, had ever uttered a single complaint until now. "Dad, hurry!" My daughter Sophie's voice cracked with panic from the passenger seat, her small hands twisting in her lap. "They can't take Grandpa's RV. We were going to camp in it this weekend." I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt just yards away, kicking up a cloud of dry dirt that flew under my worn work boots as I jumped out. The tow truck operator, a skinny guy with a scraggly, patchy beard, already had heavy chains wrapped around my RV's front axle. His indifference was infuriating. "Hey, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" I shouted, my voice hoarse with adrenaline as I ran toward him. "That's my property you're touching." The man barely glanced up, his movements mechanical. "Just doing my job, sir. Got orders to remove this vehicle." "Orders? Orders from who?" I demanded, stepping protectively between him and the beloved Winnebago, planting my feet firmly. "This is private property. My family has owned this land for nearly a century, 4 generations. He nonchalantly pulled a crumpled, official-looking paper from his back pocket. "Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association," he read off it flatly. "Says here you got 3 notices already." My hand shot out, and I snatched the paper from him. Sure enough, it had my name, John Miller, an address right at the top, followed by a list of supposed violations I'd never laid eyes on before. But it was the signature scrawled at the bottom that made my blood instantly boil. Karen Peterson, HOA President. "This is completely insane," I exclaimed, gesturing wildly. "My farm isn't part of any HOA, never has been." I whipped out my phone, my fingers trembling slightly. "I'm calling the sheriff right now." The tow operator just shrugged, unimpressed. "Suit yourself, but I got proper papers. You can take it up with the HOA while your RV sits nice and cozy in our impound lot. That'll be $200 a day, by the way, plus the $500 towing fee." His casual tone felt like rubbing salt in the wound. Just then, as if summoned, another car pulled smoothly up the driveway. A gleaming white Mercedes-Benz with custom Meadowbrook Estates license plates. Out stepped Karen Peterson herself, dressed impeccably like she was heading to a high-powered business meeting, not a dusty working farm. Her perfectly styled blonde hair didn't move an inch in the slight breeze, and her bright red lips curved into a smile that never ever reached her cold, calculating eyes. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice syrupy sweet as her expensive high heels clicked across my gravel driveway, "I see you've finally been forced to address our concerns." What concerns?" I shot back, standing my ground, feeling the heat rise in my face. And since when does your HOA have any authority whatsoever over my family's farm? Perhaps, Karen countered smoothly, pushing her designer sunglasses further up her nose, you should have paid attention to the notices we've been leaving. Your property may have once been separate, but your access road, she paused for dramatic effect, was incorporated into our jurisdiction during last year's expansion. The board voted unanimously. Sophie, who had crept out of the truck, tugged hard at my sleeve, her eyes wide with fear. Dad, they can't just take Grandpa's RV, can they? No, honey, absolutely not, I assured her, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Doubt, cold and unwelcome, was already creeping into the back of my mind. Something felt terribly, fundamentally wrong about this whole situation. Suddenly, my neighbor, Sarah Chen, must have seen the commotion. She hurried across the road, dividing our properties, still wearing her thick gardening gloves, her face etched with concern. John, don't you let them take anything. They tried the exact same stunt with my husband's boat last week. Karen Peterson's plastic smile hardened, turning brittle. Mrs. Chen, your property is also in violation. Rest assured, we'll be addressing that matter next. We never joined your HOA, Sarah fired back, her voice sharp. You can't just arbitrarily decide our farms are suddenly part of your fancy pants neighborhood. I turned back to the tow truck driver, trying a different tactic. Look, there's clearly a massive misunderstanding here. This is private property. I never signed anything agreeing to any HOA rules, and you need to unhook my RV. Right, now. For a moment, the man hesitated, glancing uncertainly at Karen for direction. The paperwork is perfectly in order, Karen insisted, her voice regaining its icy authority. The RV is an eyesore, plainly visible from our community entrance. It negatively affects property values for all 35 homes in our prestigious development. Frustrated beyond belief, I pulled out my phone again. That's it. I'm calling Sheriff Brody. He's known my family for decades. Let's just see what he has to say about this nonsense. For the briefest flicker of a second, Karen's confidence seemed to waver. Just a tiny crack in the facade. Fine, she snapped, regaining composure. We'll pause the removal. Today. But you have exactly 72 hours to move that monstrosity completely out of sight. Fail to comply, and we will be back. With proper enforcement. Proper enforcement? I echoed incredulously. This isn't your property. Check the county records. Oh, I suggest you check the county records, she replied smoothly, handing me another official-looking document, this one adorned with gold seals that looked almost comical in the dusty farm setting. Section 5, paragraph 3, clearly outlines the new boundaries. As the tow operator, looking distinctly uncomfortable now, reluctantly began removing his chains from my RV, Karen leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. 3 days, Mr. Miller, and while you're at it, you might want to address the peeling paint on your barn, and frankly, those unsightly farm implements scattered about. There are children in our community now. We have certain standards to maintain. With that final condescending remark, she strutted back to her Mercedes, leaving me standing stunned in my own driveway, clutching paperwork I couldn't comprehend and making promises to my heartbroken daughter that deep down I wasn't entirely sure I could keep. Sophie looked up at me, her big brown eyes welling with tears. Dad, we're not going to lose Grandpa's RV, are we? I pulled her into a tight hug, burying my face in her hair for a moment. Not if I have anything to say about it, sweetheart. Not a chance. As Karen's Mercedes and the tow truck disappeared down the road in a cloud of dust, Sarah stepped closer, her expression grim. John, this isn't random, she said urgently. David Lee's tractor disappeared yesterday. Elena Rodriguez found her boat gone this morning. Something much bigger and much uglier is happening here. I stared at the dust, slowly settling on the driveway, my gaze fixed on the empty space where the immediate threat had been. The RV was safe for now, but the clock was ticking loudly. How could land that had been in my family for nearly 100 years suddenly fall under the thumb of a neighborhood association that hadn't even existed 3 years ago? And more terrifyingly, what else would they try to take from us next? "Dad, wake up, they're back!" Sophie shook me awake, her voice high and thin with panic. My eyes snapped open. Peeking through the kitchen window blinds, my heart leaped into my throat. 3 unfamiliar cars were parked ominously at the edge of my property line. Dawn hadn't even fully broken yet. The sky was just beginning to blush pink. I jumped out of bed, adrenaline surging, and rushed outside barefoot in my pajamas, not even bothering with shoes. The cool, dew-kissed morning grass tickled my feet as I sprinted toward our beloved Winnebago. My blood turned to ice water when I saw her, Karen Peterson, standing there imperiously, flanked by 2 men in crisp, dark suits and, unbelievably, another man from the towing company. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice rough with sleep and anger as I planted myself protectively between them and Grandpa's RV. "It hasn't been 72 hours. Karen consulted her expensive-looking watch with exaggerated theatrical care. "Actually, Mr. Miller, it's been precisely 73 hours and 12 minutes since our last conversation. We've been more than patient, wouldn't you agree?" One of the suited men stepped forward, extending a hand that I pointedly ignored. "Arthur Vance," he announced smoothly, "Meadowbrook Estates legal counsel. I'm afraid your time to comply has officially expired." "This is absolutely ridiculous," I shot back, my fists clenching at my sides. "I've spent the last 3 days buried in county records. There is nothing showing my property was ever legally incorporated into your development." "Perhaps," Karen replied, with a smug, self-satisfied smile that made me want to scream, "You simply didn't look in the right places." She produced yet another official-looking document, seemingly out of thin air. "This amendment was filed 6 months ago. Your access road," she tapped a highlighted section on a map attached, "crosses what is now designated HOA common property, which regrettably means you are subject to our covenants, conditions, and restrictions." I snatched the paper and scanned it quickly. The dense legalese was intentionally confusing, designed to overwhelm, but I could clearly see a ridiculously thin sliver of my driveway highlighted in bright yellow. "This is insane," I repeated, feeling trapped. "You can't just claim jurisdiction over someone's entire 15-acre farm because of a shared driveway entrance." The second suit stepped forward then, his expression impassive. "I'm Richard Green from the County Zoning Office. I'm here merely to confirm that, technically speaking, the HOA's claim regarding the access road easement is correct. The easement agreement your grandfather signed back in 1976, unfortunately, allows for this interpretation." My stomach plummeted. Grandpa had told me stories about letting the neighboring farm use our driveway access decades ago, back when it was all farmland out here. Could that simple, neighborly agreement from nearly 50 years ago have somehow, twistedly, given this predatory HOA power over our entire property? It seemed impossible, yet here was a county official backing them up. The tow truck driver, a different one from the first encounter, burly and impassive, started moving purposefully toward the RV. Stop right there," I shouted, feeling my face flush hot with helpless rage. I haven't even had time to properly review these documents. You can't just show up here at sunrise and start seizing my property. By now, Sophie had come outside too, still in her pajamas, clutching her worn, stuffed bear tightly to her chest like a shield. "Daddy, what's happening?" she asked, her lower lip trembling. "Why do they want Grandpa's RV so bad?" Karen's expression soured noticeably as she looked down her nose at my daughter. "This isn't personal, child. Rules exist for a reason. That old rusty thing," she sneered, gesturing dismissively at the Winnebago, "is visible from 3 different homes in our community." I put a protective arm around Sophie's small shoulders. "Go inside and call Sarah for me, honey. Then get yourself dressed for school, okay?" Once Sophie was safely out of earshot, I stepped closer to Karen, lowering my voice, trying to appeal to any shred of humanity she might possess. "Listen to me very carefully. That RV has immense sentimental value to my family. My grandfather passed away last year, and it's one of the few tangible things we have left of him. My daughter and I were planning to fix it up together this summer, make new memories. For just a fleeting moment, I thought I saw something, maybe understanding, maybe even empathy, flicker across Karen's perfectly made-up face. But then, just as quickly, it vanished, replaced by that familiar cold, hard determination. "Sentimentality doesn't increase property values, Mr. Miller," she stated flatly. "Our homeowners paid top dollar for their scenic views. They didn't pay to look at your family's museum piece." The lawyer, Arthur Vance, cleared his throat officiously. "There are options, of course. You could construct a suitable garage to store the vehicle, or perhaps relocate it behind your barn where it is not visible from the road." Or, Karen added, her eyes gleaming with a predatory light, "you could always consider selling this land altogether. I happen to know several developers who'd pay top dollar, even with all these rather rustic structures currently on site." And just like that, everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. This was never, ever about an RV. It was never about peeling paint or farm equipment. "Now, this is about forcing us out," I said slowly, the realization dawning cold and heavy. "You want our land. You want it for more of your cookie-cutter houses." Arthur Vance adjusted his expensive tie, suddenly looking uncomfortable. The man from the zoning office, Richard Green, pointedly looked away, studying the tops of the trees. Only Karen's smug smile didn't waver. "Business is business, Mr. Miller. Meadowbrook Estates Phase 3 has to go somewhere. This entire area," she swept her hand expansively, "has been rezoned for high-density residential development." "Without notifying the current residents?" I challenged, incredulous. "Notices were published in the county register," the zoning official mumbled, still avoiding eye contact, "as required by law." Suddenly, tires screeched as Sarah Chen's pickup truck came flying down the road, kicking up a plume of dust as she skidded to a stop beside us. David Lee's truck was right behind hers, along with 3 other neighbors I recognized: Eleanor Rodriguez, Bill Davis, and the Guptas. They piled out, faces grim and determined. "Hold up right there," Sarah shouted, marching toward the officials with a thick folder clutched tightly in her hand. "John, I brought those papers we discussed." I had absolutely no idea what papers she was talking about, but the fierce, determined look in her eye told me instantly to play along. "Ah, thank you, Sarah," I said, taking the folder with feigned familiarity. I opened it quickly to find a jumble of newspaper clippings, old maps, and what looked like copies of legal documents. Sarah turned to face the officials, her stance defiant. "We've been doing our homework too. That easement agreement from 1976, it specifically prohibits using the shared access for any future development purposes without the express written consent of all original property owners. And guess what? No one ever got our consent. David Lee, a man of few words but immense presence, stepped forward, his weathered face serious under his baseball cap. And we've got signed statements right here from every single original homeowner in Meadowbrook Estates saying they were never informed that their increased HOA fees would be used to actively try and force out neighboring farms. Karen Peterson's confident demeanor finally cracked, just slightly but noticeably. Those are internal HOA matters, and frankly, none of your concern, she snapped, flustered. They become our concern when you're using those funds to hire lawyers and tow trucks to harass us, I countered, emboldened by my neighbor's support. The tow truck driver shifted uncomfortably on his feet. Look, he muttered, I'm just here to do a job. If there's like a dispute about jurisdiction or whatever, maybe we should wait. There is no dispute, Karen insisted, regaining her composure through sheer force of will. The paperwork is in order. Do your job. But just as the man reluctantly moved toward his truck controls again, a welcome sight appeared. A county sheriff's cruiser, lights flashing silently, pulled up behind the assembled vehicles. Sheriff Brody stepped out, his familiar, authoritative figure a huge relief. Morning, folks, he said calmly, his experienced eyes taking in the tense scene. Got a call about a potential property dispute? Karen immediately straightened her jacket, adopting an air of wounded dignity. Sheriff, we have all the necessary documentation right here. I'm sure you do, ma'am. The sheriff interrupted smoothly, cutting her off. But funny thing, I received some interesting information late last night from the county clerk's office. Seems there might be some, shall we say, irregularities with those recently filed boundary amendments. He turned to me, giving me a subtle, meaningful look. Mr. Miller, did you or any member of your family sign any agreement whatsoever with Meadowbrook Estates HOA in the last year? Absolutely not, Sheriff, I stated firmly and clearly. That's what I thought. Sheriff Brody nodded slowly. He turned back to face Karen and her entourage. In that case, I'm going to have to ask everyone to stand down until we get this sorted out properly down at the county office. No vehicles will be towed from this property today. Karen's face flushed a furious, blotchy red. This is outrageous. We have rights. So do these folks. The sheriff replied calmly, gesturing toward me and my neighbors. Rights that go back generations on this very land. As the tow operator closed his truck door with obvious relief, I noticed a small crowd gathering at the edge of my property. Homeowners from Meadowbrook Estates, drawn by the commotion, watching the confrontation unfold. What's really going on here, Karen? Asked a woman dressed in expensive running gear. You told us the HOA fees were going up to improve the community playground, not to harass local farmers, more residents murmured. In agreement, confusion and suspicion dawning on their faces. Karen Peterson's perfect composure finally crumbled completely as she realized she was rapidly losing control of the situation, even among her own constituents. This isn't over, she hissed venomously at me, her eyes flashing with malice before turning abruptly on her heel and stalking towards her car. Sheriff Brody touched my shoulder lightly. John, he said quietly, you might want to come down to the station later today. There's something you and your neighbors should probably see regarding those zoning changes. As the unwelcome visitors retreated hastily to their vehicles, I noticed Sophie watching from the porch, a tentative, hopeful smile finally gracing her face. Is Grandpa's RV safe now, Dad? She called out. For today, honey, I answered, suddenly acutely aware that this battle was far, far from over. But I think we need to find out what's really happening over in Meadowbrook Estates. What I didn't tell her was the deeply unsettling feeling churning in my gut. If Karen Peterson was willing to go to these lengths over an old RV, what else might she be capable of doing to get what she wanted. That entire night, sleep completely eluded me. Instead, I found myself staring, bleary-eyed, at old property maps spread across my worn kitchen table. Faded yellow lines marked the boundaries my great-grandfather had meticulously drawn when he first bought this precious land way back in 1923. There was simply no way the Meadowbrook HOA could just grab my access road like that. It defied all logic and fairness. The sheer injustice of it gnawed at me. The next morning, feeling exhausted but resolute, I called my old college buddy, Mike Thompson, who practiced law over in the next county. "Don't you dare touch that RV, John," he warned sternly after I quickly explained the whole unbelievable situation. "This whole thing absolutely stinks like a classic land grab scam. I'll dive into the official county records this afternoon and call you back the second I find anything." Hearing Mike's confident voice helped settle my nerves a bit as I headed off to my job, managing the local hardware store. Dad had always said, problems tend to look smaller in the clear light of day, but honestly, a weird, unsettling feeling clung to me like static electricity all day long. Something felt off, dangerous even. Then, around lunchtime, I noticed 3 missed calls on my cell from Sophie's elementary school. My stomach immediately clenched. When I called back, the school secretary informed me, her voice laced with concern, that none other than Karen Peterson had attempted to pick Sophie up early, claiming there was a family emergency. Luckily, Sophie is a smart kid and knew Karen wasn't on her approved pickup list, so the school followed protocol and called me instead. My blood ran ice cold. What kind of vile person would stoop so low as to try and frighten a child to use my own daughter as leverage? It was despicable. I practically flew out of the hardware store, leaving my assistant bewildered. I drove way too fast down those familiar country roads, my knuckles bone white on the steering wheel, fueled by a potent mix of fury and fear. As I finally turned onto our long, winding driveway, a sickening dread washed over me. Something looked terribly wrong. The familiar, comforting outline of Grandpa's Winnebago was conspicuously missing from its usual spot near the barn. For 3 decades, that RV had sat right there, its faded orange stripe a landmark against the weathered wood, catching the golden afternoon light. But now, there was nothing. Just a patch of flattened, dead grass where it had proudly stood. Sophie burst out of the house, her backpack still slung over one shoulder. The school bus must have just dropped her off. "Dad!" she cried, running towards me, tears already streaming down her face. "Someone took Grandpa's RV. Mrs. Gupta next door saw a tow truck. I was going to camp in it this weekend." Her voice broke on a sob. I swept her into a fierce hug, holding her tight, trying desperately to hide the towering rage and gnawing helplessness I felt. "It's okay, sweetie, it's okay," but I murmured, stroking her hair. "We'll figure this out. We will get it back." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mike. "County has no record of any boundary changes affecting your property. Something's definitely rotten in Denmark. Be careful, John." My resolve hardened. I called the police immediately. Officer Davis, the same young officer who had responded to the initial confrontation, arrived about 20 minutes later, his patrol car kicking up dust as it rolled slowly down our drive. He was young but thorough, taking careful notes as I recounted the morning's events and the subsequent theft, my voice tight with controlled anger. "So, Mr. Miller," he said, looking up from his notepad, his expression serious, "you firmly believe the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association had your recreational vehicle illicitly towed from your private property?" "Yes," Absolutely, I confirmed, handing him the crumpled orange violation notice Karen's first tow driver had left. They left me this bogus warning, but my land is not part of their development. It never has been. Officer Davis walked over to meticulously examine the patch of ground where the RV had been parked for 30 years. No obvious signs of forced entry. Looks like a professional tow job, all right, he observed grimly, snapping a few pictures with his department-issued phone. Any security cameras out here, sir? I shook my head, feeling a pang of regret. No, never thought we needed them before. Right on cue, my phone rang. Unknown number. A cold dread filled me. I answered, putting it on speakerphone for Officer Davis to hear. Looking for something, Mr. Miller? Karen Peterson's voice dripped with sickly sweet, fake sympathy that made my skin crawl. Your little eyesore has been safely impounded. The fee, as you know, is $200 per day, plus, of course, the initial $500 removal charge. Just letting you know the clock is ticking. Officer Davis subtly raised his eyebrows and stepped closer, discreetly activating the recording function on his own phone. You stole my property, I said, trying desperately to keep my voice calm, acutely aware of Sophie watching us anxiously from the porch steps. That RV belongs to my family. Oh, we didn't steal anything, Mr. Miller, Karen replied airily. We simply enforced community standards as clearly outlined in Section 8 of the HOA bylaws. Perhaps if you actually attended our community meetings, you'd understand how things operate in Meadowbrook Estates. I don't live in Meadowbrook Estates, I ground out through gritted teeth. My family has owned this farm for nearly 100 years. Check your facts, Mr. Miller, she retorted smugly. Your access road was incorporated last spring. The board voted, unanimously. Officer Davis silently motioned for me to keep her talking, letting the recording run. Where is the RV now? I demanded. Safe and sound at Apex Towing's impound lot, she purred. You know, every single day you choose to argue instead of simply paying the fine, the price just goes up and up and up. I'd hurry if I were you. And with that, she abruptly hung up, leaving an infuriating dial tone humming in the suddenly quiet air. Officer Davis tucked his phone away. Sir, he advised seriously, I'd strongly recommend you don't pay anything just yet. This whole situation sounds extremely suspicious. I'll file a detailed report and personally check with the county records office myself. After Officer Davis left, I found Sophie sitting forlornly in Grandpa's old, creaky rocking chair on the front porch, hugging her knees tightly to her chest. Are we really going to get the RV back, Dad? She asked in a small, trembling voice. Yes, I promised again, sitting down beside her, putting my arm around her shoulders. Yes, we are. Nobody is taking what belongs to this family. But that night, sleep was impossible. My mind raced, replaying countless memories tied to that old Winnebago. Grandpa patiently teaching me how to bait a hook by the lake, using the RV's fold-down steps as our fishing perch. Dad tinkering with its engine on summer afternoons, while I dutifully handed him tools. Sophie's rainy birthday party last year, when we all crammed inside the cozy Winnebago, laughing hysterically as we squished together to escape the downpour. That RV wasn't just aging metal and rubber, it was woven into the fabric of our family history. It held decades of laughter, tears, and irreplaceable memories, and nobody, absolutely nobody, had the right to just tow away memories. Driven by a restless energy, I got dressed and drove over to Apex Towing around midnight. The impound lot was surrounded by a formidable chain-link fence, topped with menacing barbed wire. Through the harsh glare of the security floodlights, I could see it. Grandpa's Winnebago, sitting forlornly amongst wrecked cars and fancy sports sedans immobilized with wheel clamps. It looked so lost and out of place. A large, unseen guard dog started barking ferociously the moment I approached the fence line, its echoing barks shattering the night's silence, so I reluctantly backed away, my heart heavy with frustration. When I finally got back home, exhausted and defeated, another surprise waited for me in the mailbox. A plain white envelope. Inside was a crisp, printed bill from Apex Towing for $700, $500, tow plus $200 first-day storage, and, chillingly, a recent grainy photo of my sturdy old barn, with a huge, crude red X spray-painted through it. Scrawled menacingly across the bottom, in thick black marker, were the words, "Unauthorized agricultural structure. Removal scheduled for Friday." My breath hitched. These people, they weren't just after my RV. They weren't just after fines. They wanted my barn. They wanted my land. They wanted to erase my family's history, piece by painful piece. I shot straight up in bed, heart pounding, when someone started hammering violently on my front door at 6 o'clock the next morning. It wasn't even light out yet. My first panicked thought was, they've come for the barn already. Adrenaline surged through me. I grabbed my grandfather's heavy old Louisville Slugger baseball bat from the back of the closet and crept cautiously downstairs, peering through the peephole. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by concern. It was David Lee, my neighbor, who ran the apple orchard next door. His face was flushed red, and his dusty pickup truck was parked crookedly in my driveway, engine still running like he'd slammed on the brakes in a desperate hurry. "They got my tractor, John," David blurted out the second I opened the door, his voice choked with rage. He was still wearing pajama pants, hastily tucked into mud-caked work boots. "My grandfather's 1957 John Deere. That beauty's been in my family longer than their whole stupid, pretentious neighborhood has even existed." I quickly pulled him inside and poured him a strong cup of hot coffee while he paced frantically around my kitchen like a caged animal. "Same people?" I asked, though I already knew the gut-wrenching answer. "Apex Towing, sir," he confirmed, slamming his fist hard on my kitchen counter, making the mugs rattle. "Left me the same damn orange notice you got." And that tractor wasn't even visible from their precious community entrance. It was parked way behind my barn. Before I could even respond, my phone rang shrilly. It was Elena Rodriguez, who owned the small lavender farm down the road, her voice tight with anxiety. "John, did you hear about David's tractor? They took my boat too, sometime last night, right off my own property." Within an hour, my kitchen felt like a war room. It was packed with anxious, angry neighbors. Unbelievably, 5 families living along the disputed edge of Meadowbrook Estates had lost something valuable overnight: David's irreplaceable tractor, Eleanor's cherished fishing boat, Bill Davis's classic 1969 Mustang restoration project, the Gupta's beloved family camping trailer, and of course, my grandfather's Winnebago. Mrs. Gupta brought over fresh, steaming samosas that filled the kitchen with a comforting aroma, a small gesture of solidarity amidst the rising panic. "Karen Peterson came to our house personally yesterday afternoon," she said, her voice still shaking slightly. She told us that good neighbors don't keep junk on their property. My husband's family camped all over the country in that trailer for 40 years. It's not junk." Bill Davis, a retired history teacher with a meticulous mind, spread out an official county zoning map on my table. "Look here, everyone," he instructed, pointing to the clearly delineated boundaries of Meadowbrook Estates. "Notice anything strange?" We all leaned in closer, peering intently at the map. The HOA boundaries shown on this official map looked nothing like the doctored map Karen Peterson had shoved at me. "And this is the official county planning map," Bill explained calmly. Updated just last month. See? Our properties aren't anywhere near their legal jurisdiction. Never have been. Then how in God's name are they getting away with this? Elena demanded, her frustration palpable. David Lee's wife, Linda, who worked as a teller at the bank in town, had been mostly quiet until now, observing everything. Follow the money, she said softly, but firmly. Exactly, Bill Davis nodded grimly. And guess who owns Apex Towing? Karen Peterson's husband, Stanley. And Stanley's brother just happens to sit on the county zoning board. He sighed. Taught him American history in high school. Not exactly the brightest bulb, I'm afraid. Easily influenced. Elena suddenly pulled out her phone, her eyes wide. Look at this, she exclaimed, showing us a glossy online real estate listing. Coming soon. Meadowbrook Estates, Phase 3, luxury homes with unspoiled country views. The promotional map accompanying the listing clearly showed sprawling new houses built precisely where our farms currently stood. A cold, heavy dread filled my stomach, settling like lead. This isn't about an old RV or a tractor or peeling paint, I said slowly, the pieces clicking together into an ugly picture. They're trying to systematically force us all out so they can buy our land cheap, or maybe even take it outright through bogus fines and property liens. Precisely, Bill Davis confirmed, his expression grim. If we can't pay their fabricated penalties, they can slap liens on our properties, wait long enough, maybe force a tax sale. It's a predatory, albeit potentially legal, way to steal land. Just then, Sophie came downstairs, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Seeing the kitchen full of grim-faced neighbors, she froze uncertainly on the bottom step. Dad, what's wrong? Nothing, sweetie, I lied, forcing a reassuring smile. Just grown-up stuff. Why don't you go over to the Gupta's place and play with Aruna for a little while? After she hesitantly left, clutching her stuffed bear, we got down to serious business. David knew a sharp lawyer in the city who specialized in complex property disputes and wasn't afraid to fight dirty HOAs. Mrs. Gupta revealed her cousin worked as an investigative reporter at the local news station. And Bill had taught half the county officials currently in office and still commanded considerable respect. We need concrete proof, Linda Lee insisted, ever the pragmatist, hard records of exactly where our things were taken, who ordered the tows, and precisely where the money from these exorbitant fees is going. Sir, I have the phone call with Karen from yesterday, I told them. Officer Davis recorded her, threatening me and admitting they impounded the RV. Elena looked up excitedly from her phone. My brother-in-law works down at the county records office. He just texted me back. He says there is absolutely no legal filing showing any boundary changes for Meadowbrook Estates bordering our properties. Whatever document Karen showed you and the zoning guy confirmed was utterly, completely fake. As we frantically started making plans, assigning tasks, gathering evidence, a familiar sight appeared. A county sheriff's cruiser pulling slowly into my driveway. Officer Davis stepped out, but this time he wasn't alone. A tall woman in a sharply tailored dark suit followed him purposefully toward my front door. Mr. Miller, Officer Davis said formally when I answered the door. This is Detective Johnson from the County Sheriff's Office, Major Crimes Division. We need to talk. My heart skipped a beat. Major crimes? I invited them in, quickly introducing them to my assembled anxious neighbors. Detective Johnson surveyed the kitchen, taking in the map, the folder of papers, the angry, worried faces, and nodded slowly. Looks like you folks have all started figuring out something's seriously wrong here, she said, her voice calm and professional as she declined my offer of coffee. Frankly, I've been investigating Apex Towing and certain influential members of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board for the past 6 months. My neighbors and I exchanged stunned looks. 6 months? That's right, Detective Johnson continued, opening a briefcase and spreading a series of surveillance photos across my kitchen table. They've been pulling this exact same predatory scam in 3 different counties. It's a well-oiled machine. The photos showed tow trucks operating under the cover of darkness, properties clearly outside Meadowbrook's boundaries, and chillingly, Karen Peterson meeting covertly with men who looked like developers or lawyers. They target properties adjacent to existing developments, claim jurisdiction through falsified documents or obscure easement loopholes, tow valuable items, and then charge outrageous, crippling fees to get them back. Then why haven't you stopped them? David Lee demanded, his voice thick with frustration. Why are they still doing this? Because, the detective explained patiently, until now, every single victim either paid the exorbitant fees or simply gave up and moved away, selling their land under duress. We needed someone, just one victim, willing to officially press charges, to stand up and fight back. We also needed irrefutable proof of them actually ordering illegal tows on properties definitively outside their jurisdiction. Bill Davis adjusted his glasses, peering closely at the photos. These are all Apex towing trucks. And that's Stanley Peterson right there, Karen's husband, directing them in this shot. Detective Johnson nodded grimly. Stanley runs the towing operation. Karen handles the HOA manipulation and intimidation. Their friend on the zoning board helps push through quick rezoning approvals once people sell under pressure. And the luxury homes go up, making them all richer. Exactly, Linda Lee finished, her earlier suspicion confirmed. Detective Johnson pulled out her official notebook. With multiple credible complaints now formally filed, we can finally build a strong criminal case. But we still need rock-solid evidence of them ordering these illegal tows onto properties confirmed to be outside their legal boundaries. Elena leaned forward eagerly. We can help with that. They don't know we're all talking to each other now. They think they can pick us off one by one. Officer Davis, who had been observing quietly, finally spoke up. There's something else you should all know, Mr. Miller. When I ran the plates on Karen Peterson's Mercedes yesterday, I found multiple prior complaints filed against her for harassment and intimidation in other jurisdictions. And perhaps more disturbingly, there's a pending investigation into how she even became HOA president in the first place. Apparently, the previous president resigned very suddenly last year, right after his prize-winning dog mysteriously disappeared. A collective chill went through the room. These people weren't just greedy, they were potentially dangerous and utterly ruthless. I've already requested extra patrols past all your properties, Detective Johnson stated reassuringly. In the meantime, document everything. Every interaction, every notice, every phone call. But please, no direct confrontations. Let us handle it from here. As they prepared to leave, Detective Johnson paused at my door, turning back. One more thing, she added, her voice low. We've had a covert surveillance operation focused on Apex towing for several weeks now, including discrete cameras placed near your property lines. You've been watching us? Bill asked, clearly shocked. Not you, the detective clarified quickly. Them. We've been trying to catch them in the act. She handed me her official business card. Call me directly, day or night, if they make any more moves, any threats, anything at all. After the officers left, my neighbors and I looked at each other, a newfound sense of grim determination settling over us. We weren't just fighting for tractors and RVs anymore. We were fighting for our homes, our land, our heritage, and our entire community's future against a corrupt and powerful conspiracy. I have an idea, I said finally, the seed of a plan forming in my mind. But it's going to be risky, and it's going to take all of us working together, perfectly synchronized. David Lee clapped me firmly on the shoulder, his eyes blazing with resolve. "I'm in, John. Whatever it takes. Nobody messes with our families and gets away with it." One by one, my neighbors nodded in solemn agreement. The Meadowbrook HOA, Karen Peterson, her husband, they all thought they could pick us off individually, exploit our fear and isolation. They had absolutely no idea what was coming for them. "We need to talk. Inside," Detective Johnson whispered urgently, glancing quickly over her shoulder as if expecting unseen eyes to be watching us even now. Those quiet words sent a fresh wave of chills down my spine. Suddenly, my own familiar kitchen felt too small, too exposed, crammed with Officer Davis, Detective Johnson, and my anxious, determined neighbors huddled around the oak table, the same table where my family had shared countless meals for generations. The detective opened her worn leather briefcase again, the clicks echoing in the tense silence. This time, she spread out dozens of stark, black and white surveillance photographs. "What you're about to see and hear absolutely stays within these four walls," she stated, her voice low and dead serious. The photos were damning. They showed Karen Peterson meeting discreetly with men in expensive suits, developers no doubt, signing papers in dimly lit parking lots, even handing over thick envelopes that almost certainly contained cash. There were clearer shots, too, of Apex towing trucks operating in the dead of night, winching up boats, tractors, classic cars, and RVs from properties that looked hauntingly similar to ours. Hard-working folks caught in the same nightmare. As I said, we've been monitoring Karen Peterson, her husband Stanley, and Apex Towing for 6 months now, Detective Johnson explained, pointing to the timestamps digitally imprinted on the photos. They've hit over 40 properties across 3 different counties. It's always the exact same predatory pattern. Claim your land falls under their HOA rules through some obscure loophole or outright falsified paperwork. Tow your most valuable possessions, then charge absolutely crippling fees to get them back, hoping you'll either pay through the nose or give up and sell cheap. Elena gasped, grabbing one particular photo. "That's my cousin Miguel's fishing boat. They took it last month from his place over in West Haven County." "That's exactly right," Officer Davis confirmed grimly, "and your cousin, unfortunately, paid $100 cash to get it back, rather than try to fight them in court." My own blood boiled. If they knew all this, why hadn't they acted sooner? "If you know all this," I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice, "why haven't you arrested them already? Why did they still get away with taking my family's RV just yesterday?" Detective Johnson sighed deeply, rubbing her tired eyes. It was clear this case was weighing heavily on her. 2 primary reasons, Mr. Miller. First, as I mentioned, we desperately needed a victim, someone with clear evidence of being outside their jurisdiction, who was willing to stand their ground and formally press charges. Most people are either too scared, too overwhelmed, or simply can't afford a legal battle, so they pay up or move away. Second, she leaned in slightly, we needed ironclad, irrefutable proof of either Karen or Stanley Peterson personally giving direct orders for an illegal tow on property clearly outside their boundaries. We needed to catch them red-handed, directing the operation. She pulled out another folder, this one filled with detailed surveyor maps and zoning diagrams. I instantly recognized the layout of my own property. Your farm, Mr. Miller, is unique. It sits right at the crucial nexus of what Karen Peterson and her developer cronies call Phase 3 of their Meadowbrook Estates expansion plan. She carefully laid down a glossy document emblazoned with the Meadowbrook Estates letterhead. This is their internal 5-year expansion proposal. They want your land, Mr. Lee's orchard next door, and about 5 other adjacent properties pretty badly. David Lee slammed his fist on the table again, harder this time. They can't just take our land. No, legally, they can't just take it, Detective Johnson conceded, but they can make owning it so incredibly miserable, so financially draining, that you'll feel you have no choice but to sell. And that, she said grimly, is precisely what they've been doing systematically across 3 counties. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, metallic, and surprisingly intricate. At first glance, I thought it was a tiny, decorative metal bird. But looking closer, I realized with a jolt, it was a sophisticated miniature camera, cleverly disguised as a common chickadee. We've had several of these placed strategically along your property line, hidden in the trees, for the past 3 weeks, Mr. Miller. My jaw dropped. You've been spying on my land? Without telling me? The invasion of privacy felt profound, even if it was aimed at the Petersons. We had a warrant, Officer Davis interjected quickly, sliding a folded legal document across the table toward me. After the initial complaints started surfacing from other Meadowbrook border properties, Judge Harmon approved limited, targeted surveillance. But until yesterday's incident with your RV, we hadn't managed to capture them giving explicit illegal orders on tape. I scanned the warrant, a confusing mix of emotions battling inside me, lingering anger at the intrusion, but also a growing flicker of hope that these officers might actually be able to help us nail these crooks. There's more, Detective Johnson continued, lowering her voice significantly. We have strong reason to believe Karen's husband Stanley doesn't just own Apex Towing. He's also secretly partnered with Omnicorp. That's the shadowy development company that's been aggressively buying up distressed and foreclosed properties all around this area. Elena nodded vigorously. My brother works in construction. He's heard rumors for months. Omnicorp is planning a massive high-end shopping center and condo complex right where our homes are standing. They've been trying to buy us all out with lowball offers for years. The detective then clicked open an app on her secure department phone, showing us a complex flowchart of financial transactions. This is a dummy corporation account we set up specifically to track the money flow. We've confirmed that every time Apex Towing collects one of these outrageous impound fees from victims in this specific Tri-County area, a significant percentage flows directly, untraceably, into this shell company called Willow Investments. And guess who the primary stakeholders in Willow Investments are? Karen Peterson, we all murmured in unison. Karen Peterson, Detective Johnson confirmed, her husband Stanley, and, surprise, surprise, 3 key members of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board, including Stanley's brother, on the zoning board. My mind raced, furiously connecting dots I should have seen much earlier. The constant, petty harassment about my fence height last year. The bogus noise complaints whenever I harvested corn after dusk. The sudden, intense fixation on my grandfather's harmless old RV. It was never random. It was all part of a calculated long-term strategy. It was targeted. Why are you telling us all of this now? I asked, a sliver of suspicion still lingering in my voice. What exactly do you want from us? Detective Johnson slowly gathered the scattered photos, her expression turning deadly serious. Because they're escalating, Mr. Miller. Last month, a farmer over in Glendale County who publicly refused to pay their bogus fees and threatened to sue had his main barn mysteriously burned down in the middle of the night. Arson investigators suspect foul play, but we couldn't definitively prove it was them. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the kitchen. The air crackled with unspoken fear. We need your help, Officer Davis finally said, breaking the silence, his gaze steady. We need you to let us set a trap. David Lee leaned forward intently, his earlier anger replaced by steely resolve. What kind of trap? A small, predatory smile touched Detective Johnson's lips for the first time. "The kind of trap," she said softly, "where Karen Peterson and her husband think they're finally getting exactly what they want." Right then, almost as if on cue, my phone buzzed loudly on the table. I glanced down at the screen. It was a text message from Karen Peterson. "Thinking about your difficult situation, Mr. Miller. Perhaps we can work something out after all. Might be amenable to discussing a potential sale. Meeting tomorrow at my office? 9:00 a.m. Sharp." My heart started racing. I showed the text to the others around the table. "Perfect timing," Detective Johnson breathed, her eyes lighting up with strategic intensity. "This is our chance. This is it. But," she fixed her gaze directly on me, "you need to understand, John. If you agree to help us with this, things might get considerably worse before they get better. These people play dirty, very dirty." I thought about Sophie's tear-streaked face when she saw the empty space where Grandpa's RV should have been. I thought about my grandfather, who poured his heart and soul into building this farm with his own calloused hands. I thought about my neighbors, good, hard-working people, losing their homes and heritage to corporate greed and corruption. "What exactly, I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, feeling a surge of righteous anger. "Do you need me to do?" Detective Johnson pulled a tiny, sophisticated recording device from her briefcase and slid it carefully across the oak table toward me. "Go to that meeting tomorrow, John. Wear this. Get her to admit, on tape, exactly what they're doing. The illegal towing scheme, the plan to force you out, the connection to Phase 3. Get her talking. And then, I didn't sleep a wink that night either." The tiny, state-of-the-art recording device Detective Johnson had given me sat ominously on my nightstand, looking far more dangerous than any power tool or piece of farm equipment I'd ever handled. My 9 a.m. meeting with Karen Peterson loomed ahead like a gathering storm cloud, heavy with potential consequences. Sophie peeked her head into my room just as dawn was breaking, her small face etched with worry. "Dad, are we really truly going to get Grandpa's RV back today?" "We're sure going to try our hardest, sweetheart," I promised, pulling her into a hug that, frankly, I probably needed more than she did. The weight of what I was about to do felt immense. After dropping a subdued Sophie off at school, forcing a confident smile I didn't feel, I drove over to Karen Peterson's office, located within the ridiculously opulent Meadowbrook Estates Community Center. The pristine building, with its manicured lawns and fancy, bubbling water features, seemed to openly mock the struggling farms like mine that surrounded it. It felt like enemy territory. Inside, Karen waited behind a massive, polished mahogany desk, looking every bit the corporate executive in a crisp power blazer that likely cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "James, oh, sorry, John," she corrected herself with a dismissive wave, not even bothering to hide her condescension. "Thank you for coming in." Her smile, as always, was wide but completely devoid of warmth, never touching her cold, assessing eyes. The tiny recording device felt like a lead weight in my shirt pocket, burning against my skin. "Coffee?" she offered perfunctorily. "No thanks, Val," I replied, trying to keep my voice even and steady, remembering Detective Johnson's instructions. Act defeated but willing to negotiate. "Your text mentioned working something out." Karen folded her perfectly manicured hands on the gleaming desktop. "Yes. I believe we may have gotten off on the wrong foot initially, John. The HOA certainly doesn't want to be perceived as unreasonable. Taking my family's RV without any legal right seemed pretty unreasonable to me," I countered, letting a hint of weary frustration show. She waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away an annoying fly. "Rules are rules, unfortunately, but I've been thinking, your particular situation is somewhat unique." She smoothly pulled out a thick folder from a drawer. And so I have prepared an offer that might interest you. Inside the folder was a formal purchase agreement for my entire 15-acre farm. The offer price was staggeringly low, barely half its assessed market value. You want me to sell my family's legacy, my home, for this pitiful amount? The anger that flared in my voice this time wasn't faked. It was raw and real. Instantly, Karen's fake smile vanished, replaced by a look of hard-nosed impatience. Let's be practical, John. Farming, let's face it, is a dying business around here. You're completely surrounded by progress. She gestured vaguely towards the window, overlooking the manicured grounds. She leaned forward conspiratorially across the desk. And let's be brutally honest, shall we? The fines, they are adding up rather quickly. It's $500 towing, plus $200 a day storage for the RV. Oh, and plus the new violation notice I had issued yesterday for that unsightly old pickup truck currently parked on your property. That's my neighbor's truck, David Lee. He's just visiting, I protested, trying to sound defensive. Visiting? For 3 consecutive days? With expired license plate tags? Her eyebrow arched skeptically. I'm afraid that constitutes another violation according to the CC&Rs, $100 per day. At this rate, she tapped a perfectly polished fingernail on the lowball offer, you'll likely owe the HOA more than your land is even worth by summer's end. I slumped slightly in my chair, trying my best to look defeated, overwhelmed. This feels like harassment, Karen. No, John, she replied coolly, her voice devoid of any emotion. This is simply business. Meadowbrook Estates is expanding. Phase 3 development commences this fall. Your land, she stated it as an undeniable fact, is going to be part of that expansion. The only real question is whether you sell to us voluntarily now on these terms, or whether we eventually foreclose on you later for accumulated unpaid fines and liens. There it was. The admission. The explicit threat. The confirmation of everything Detective Johnson suspected. I prayed silently, desperately, that the tiny device, nestled in my pocket, was capturing every single damning word crystal clear. And if I refuse? I asked, forcing a tremor into my voice. If I try to fight this? Karen Peterson's sharp, predatory smile returned, colder and more menacing than before. Well, she sighed dramatically, things can get difficult, very difficult. Just ask the Johnsons over in Glendale County. Such a terrible shame about that barn fire they had last month. Faulty wiring, they suspect. My blood ran cold. She wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. Are you threatening me, Karen? No, she purred, leaning back in her chair, the picture of relaxed confidence. I'm simply educating you, John, on the unfortunate realities of progress in today's world. She gestured again to the purchase agreement. The choice ultimately is yours. Take our generous offer now, or stand by and watch helplessly as everything you value gets towed away, fined and liened, piece by painful piece, until you have absolutely nothing left. I stood up slowly, making sure my hands were visibly shaking, though it didn't require much acting at that point. Real, potent anger, mixed with icy fear, coursed through me. I need some time. I need to think about this. You have until Friday, she called out briskly as I walked towards the door on unsteady legs. After Friday noon, the offer automatically drops by $10,000 each week you delay. Clock's ticking, John. The moment I got outside, safely back in the privacy of my old pickup truck, I sent a trembling text to Detective Johnson. Got it. She spilled everything, threatened me, even mentioned the Glendale barn fire. Her reply came back almost instantly. Perfect. Stay calm. Phase 2 commences tonight. Make absolutely sure David Lee brings his classic truck back and parks it exactly where we discussed. That evening, as dusk began to settle, our desperate plan kicked into high gear. David Lee, his face a mask of nervous tension, drove his beautifully restored cherry-red 1965 Ford pickup, his absolute pride and joy, and parked it deliberately right in my front yard, perfectly visible from the main road bordering Meadowbrook Estates. To make absolutely sure Karen Peterson's neighborhood spies noticed it, we had David rev the powerful engine several times, the sound echoing through the quiet evening air. "You absolutely sure about this, John?" David asked nervously, compulsively polishing an already gleaming spot on his truck's fender. "My dad bought this truck brand new back in '65. It's practically family." "We protect it, David," I promised grimly, though my own stomach was twisting into knots with worry. The stakes felt terrifyingly high. Detective Johnson arrived shortly after in an unmarked surveillance van as darkness fully descended. 4 plainclothes officers, dressed convincingly as farmhands, quickly helped unload sophisticated surveillance equipment into the shadowy recesses of my barn. Directional microphones, high-intensity night vision scopes, and we have armed backup concealed in the woods along the entire property line. Detective Johnson explained rapidly, pointing to key spots on a detailed satellite map of my property spread across the van's hood. "We've already alerted Judge Harmon. She's standing by, ready to issue the arrest warrants the absolute moment we have visual and audio confirmation of the illegal tow attempt in progress." Officer Davis handed out small, discreet earpieces to me, David, Sarah, and Elena, who had gathered nervously. "Everyone stays in constant radio contact," he instructed firmly. "No unnecessary chatter. If Karen Peterson shows up herself, even better. But our primary targets tonight are the apex towing operators. Catching them physically in the act of hooking up to the vehicle on property we can prove is outside their jurisdiction." As true night deepened, cloaking the farm in darkness, we took our assigned positions. Sarah, Eleanor, and I watched tensely from my darkened living room window, peering out into the blackness. David hid nervously in my musty basement, which offered a clear, ground-level view of his beloved truck, parked vulnerably under the faint moonlight. The police officers concealed themselves silently in the barn, behind the massive old oak tree at the edge of the woods, and in other strategic shadows. Minutes stretched into agonizingly long hours. The silence was thick, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. My eyelids grew heavy with fatigue and tension as midnight approached, then passed. Doubt began to creep in. Maybe they wouldn't take the bait. Then, suddenly, Eleanor grabbed my arm, her grip like steel. "Headlights," she whispered urgently, "coming slow with their lights off." My heart hammered against my ribs as I raised the night vision binoculars to my eyes. Sure enough, 2 large tow trucks, unmistakably belonging to Apex Towing, were creeping stealthily down my long driveway, running completely dark to avoid detection. And right behind them, moving like a shark in the night, followed a sleek, black SUV, Karen Peterson's vehicle. "They took the bait," I whispered shakily into my mic, my voice barely audible. "All 3 targets are approaching the designated zone." "And hold positions." Detective Johnson's calm voice crackled back instantly in my ear. "Wait until they physically hook up the vehicle. We need that positive action." Through the eerie green glow of the night vision scope, I watched the 2 tow operators work with practiced, efficient silence. They conferred briefly with Karen Peterson, who remained inside her idling SUV, pointing imperiously toward David's gleaming red truck. "She's giving direct orders," I reported softly, my hands slick with sweat, confirming visual on Peterson, instructing operators to take the Ford. "Copy that," Recording everything, came the terse reply. The first heavy tow cable snaked out and connected to the underside of David's truck with a distinct metallic clink that echoed unnaturally loud in the stillness. The operator began tightening the winch, the cable groaning under the strain. "They're taking it! They're taking my truck!" David's panicked voice suddenly burst through the earpiece. "Wait for my signal, David, wait!" Detective Johnson commanded sharply. The front end of the classic Ford lifted higher off the ground. The second tow vehicle began maneuvering menacingly toward my old farm tractor, parked near the barn. "Now!" Detective Johnson shouted into the comms. Instantly, the night exploded with light. Powerful, blinding floodlights mounted on the barn, the house, and hidden positions blazed to life, turning the darkness into harsh, inescapable daylight. David's precious truck dropped abruptly back to the ground with a heavy bounce as the startled tow operator instinctively released the winch controls. "Police, hands where we can see them. Do it now." Officers emerged simultaneously from every direction. The barn, the trees, the shadows, weapons drawn and leveled, their commands sharp and authoritative in the sudden chaos. The look of pure shock and terror on the tow truck drivers' faces was almost comical. One, younger and wiry, made a desperate break for the dark tree line, but didn't get more than 10 yards before Officer Davis tackled him hard to the ground. The other, older and heavier, froze instantly, hands shooting high above his head, eyes wide with disbelief. But it was Karen Peterson's reaction that I'll truly never forget. She frantically slammed her SUV into reverse, tires spitting gravel and mud as she tried to escape, only to find her path completely blocked by two sheriff's department cruisers that had silently materialized at the end of my driveway, lights now flashing brightly. When officers approached her window, weapons still raised, she initially feigned shocked innocence. "What is the meaning of this? I'm simply checking on a potential resident complaint," she protested loudly, her voice shrill with forced indignation as they firmly ordered her out of the vehicle. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am the president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. "Oh, we know exactly who you are, Mrs. Peterson," Detective Johnson said calmly, stepping forward and expertly snapping handcuffs onto Karen's wrists before she could react further. The click of the cuffs sounded incredibly loud in the sudden silence. "And thanks to Mr. Miller here, we have everything. The threats, the orders, this entire illegal operation, all meticulously recorded. From the impounded tow trucks and Karen's SUV, officers recovered stacks of pre-printed, fraudulent towing authorizations with forged signatures, including several with my name, crudely forged at the bottom. And tucked beneath the driver's seat of Karen's luxurious SUV, they found the real prize. A detailed ledger, meticulously tracking all their illegal tows across 3 counties, listing the exorbitant fees collected and documenting the flow of profits into their illicit shell company. As 2 uniformed officers led a sputtering, furious Karen Peterson toward a waiting police car, she shot me a look filled with pure, unadulterated hatred that burned right through me. You set me up. This isn't over. You'll pay for this," she shrieked. I stepped forward then, feeling a strength and resolve I hadn't felt in weeks, maybe years. "Actually, Karen," I said, my voice clear and steady, meeting her venomous gaze without flinching, "I think it is over. And by the way," I added, unable to resist a small, satisfying smile, "I'll be expecting my grandfather's RV back first thing tomorrow morning, delivered free of charge." As the police cars, sirens now wailing softly, drove away down my driveway, carrying away the architects of the scheme, my neighbors emerged cautiously from their hiding spots, their faces a mixture of relief, disbelief, and dawning triumph. David ran immediately to check his beloved truck for any damage, while Sarah and Elena hugged me tightly, tears of relief streaming down their faces. "We did it, John," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We actually did it." But Detective Johnson, watching the retreating taillights disappear down the dark road, looked more serious than celebratory. "This is just the beginning," she warned gravely. "Getting the warrants for Karen was the first step. Tomorrow we go after her husband Stanley, the crooked zoning official, and the complicit board members. And trust me," she added, meeting my eyes, "they won't go down without a fight." Breaking news: local HOA president arrested in widespread illegal towing scheme. The reporter's authoritative voice boomed from my living room TV the next morning as Karen Peterson's smug, perfectly coiffed mugshot flashed humiliatingly onto the screen. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. "Did you see her face when those handcuffs clicked shut?" David Lee roared with laughter over the phone. "Priceless. I swear, John, I never thought I'd get my old Ford back and see justice served all in the same glorious night." The evidence compiled by Detective Johnson and her team, combined with our recorded testimony and the damning ledger found in Karen's car, was overwhelming. Within days, search warrants were executed. Police found boxes upon boxes of falsified documents, forged signatures, and incriminating financial records hidden in the Petersons' lavish home office. Stanley Peterson's towing company, Apex Towing, was immediately shut down, its assets frozen pending investigation. Records proved they had illegally towed and extorted money for over 30 vehicles, boats, trailers, classic cars, RVs, from hard-working families who didn't even legally belong to their HOA spanning 3 counties. Then, later that morning, Sophie shouted from the kitchen window, "Daddy, look! Look!" A large flatbed truck was slowly making its way up our long driveway, and sitting proudly on the back, looking a bit weathered but whole, was Grandpa's 1978 Winnebago. My heart swelled with relief and gratitude. The driver, a gruff but professional man from a different legitimate towing company contracted by the sheriff's department, handed me some papers. "Judge Harmon ordered emergency property return for all identifiable victims," he explained gruffly. "Sign here, please." I scribbled my name, unable to stop smiling. I couldn't believe how quickly the tides had turned. Just days ago, we were victims, feeling helpless and harassed. Today, improbably, we felt like heroes in our own small story. That night, our farm buzzed with activity. Neighbors brought over potluck dishes, casseroles, salads, pies, spreading blankets out on the lawn as the sun began to set. Even several families from inside Meadowbrook Estates cautiously came over, bringing apologies and offerings of friendship. We had absolutely no idea what Karen and the board were really doing with our dues, confessed Mrs. Thompson, a woman who lived deep within the HOA development. "We feel terrible. We voted her and the entire old board out first thing this morning in an emergency meeting. We've elected a completely new board, committed to transparency and, frankly, being decent neighbors." Local news vans lined our quiet country road for the next few days. Everyone, it seemed, wanted to interview the humble farmer and his neighbors, who had dared to stand up to and take down a corrupt criminal HOA ring. It was surreal. Amidst the flurry of activity, Detective Johnson pulled me aside quietly. "Just wanted you to know, John," she said, a rare smile touching her lips. "This case turned out to be even bigger than we initially thought. Your willingness to fight back didn't just save your property and your neighbors. It helped us completely dismantle a criminal enterprise that was systematically forcing dozens of families off their land across 3 counties. You stopped them cold." Hearing that felt better than any financial settlement could have. Later that evening, Long after the last neighbors and news crews had departed, Sophie and I sat together inside the dusty but beloved Winnebago, using flashlights to pore over Grandpa's treasured collection of old national park maps spread across the small dinette table. The familiar smell of old vinyl and lingering campfire smoke felt like coming home. Is Karen going to jail forever, Dad? Sophie asked quietly, tracing the route to Yellowstone with her small finger. Not forever, sweetheart, I replied honestly, putting my arm around her. But certainly for a good long while. The important thing is, she can't hurt anyone else like this anymore. I gently took my grandfather's old, worn map of the Western National Parks and laid it flat on the table. So, I asked, smiling down at her, where should we take our first big camping trip in Grandpa's RV? Sophie looked up, her eyes shining brightly in the flashlight beam, her earlier fear completely replaced by excitement. Anywhere, Dad, she declared happily. Anywhere at all, as long as it's far, far away from nosy neighbors who think they get to make up all the rules. This whole ordeal taught us a powerful lesson. Sometimes standing your ground isn't just about saving an old RV or fighting a bogus fine. Sometimes it's about protecting the things that truly matter most. Your family, your freedom, your history, and the simple, fundamental right to be left alone on your own property. It showed us that even when facing powerful, seemingly untouchable forces, ordinary people can fight back and win when they stand together, support each other, and refuse to be intimidated into silence. Never underestimate the power of community and the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. What do you think about this story? Have you ever had issues with an HOA or felt like someone was trying to unfairly push you around? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss our next video.